That was the process of your engagement? You captured a member of Team China, named Zhao Yingkong? In the flagship of the United States 7th Fleet, Team East Sea had switched on the communication device with Team Celestial. In the situation where the sneak attack campaign had gone successfully, the moment that Team East Sea's fate would be decided had come. They had to make the final decision on whether they would use this member to negotiate with Team China or follow Adam's scheme. Yes, her name is Zhao Yingkong. Our Psyche Force user could search the router layer of her consciousness, so such basic information was easy to confirm. Mayatakariki said feebly. A large majority of the black runes on the man's body had disappeared, with the remaining ones being extremely faint. His complexion looked extremely poor, and looked much more terrible than Koinamasu next to him, who was missing an arm. I'm very curious. This girl, Zhao Yingkong, is one of the powerful members of Team China based on my information. She seems to have been a genius of the assassin clan before. Pardon my presumptuousness, I don't believe it's possible for you to capture her with your team's power, especially with just two of you. This Adam's warm voice was transmitted over. However, these words made all of Team East Sea's faces pale. Mayatakariki hesitated, before sighing. The Ghost Knight has two separate enhancement paths. What I enhanced was heart. The katana rends the fleshy body, while the heart rends the soul. If the soul is weak, or if the soul already has some problems, it's not impossible to be knocked unconscious by me. Or, do you mean that this is Team China's trap? Let's not discuss now whether it's a trap. I'll ask, what is your next step? How do you plan to deal with this Team China member? Adam suddenly asked. Mayatakariki looked at those around him, looking intentionally at Saraoi. The girl gave him a serious nod, before he said seriously, we plan to negotiate with Team China. Although one of us died, our past points are enough to offset the negative points. Our Team East Sea has prepared a long time for the final battle, and we've captured a member of Team China. Well, use this to threaten them. If so. You can't be that naive, right? Adam's voice resounded. Do you think there's a team that will give up on several tens of thousands of points and rank S and above rank rewards? Even if they'll give it up, it'll only be in the circumstances where both sides are equal. Do you think other teams will respect a team without sufficient deterrence? Mayatakariki immediately didn't say a word. Not just him, but all of Team East Sea's faces turned ashen. Only that muscular baldy was irritable due to missing an arm, and immediately exploded. I remember you told us before that Team China, amongst the three strongest teams, is very hypocritical, pretending to be kind and righteous. Even if it's just a pleasant front, they wouldn't abandon their comrade, right? Yes, I did say that. Adam laughed. With your experience and intelligence, all you can do is parrot me. The so-called hypocrisy and pretending to be kind and righteous depends on what enemy is being faced. Do you think Team China can maintain that hypocrisy upon facing Team East Sea? What does that mean? Koinamasu was stunned. You Japanese like to refer to Chinese as yellow monkeys, right? Adam maintained that warm laughter. I don't know what kind of education you received from young, or what kind of environment shaped you. Respecting the enemy is respecting oneself. But, don't you think it to be quite shameless to keep imploring the other side to maintain their hypocrisy and let you off when you keep shouting yellow monkeys, and are in a position of weakness? Alright, well, put aside this topic of shamelessness for now. Just as both sides would consider power, they would consider enmities as well. When you use humiliating forms of address like yellow monkeys, do you think Team China will have a good impression of you? The enmity from feuds looks amusing to onlookers. Only, those involved won't be clear-headed, and are just idiots trapped in hatred. If you can't let go of this enmity, do you think Team China will treat you like an ordinary team? You all are bitter enemies. Even if they're righteous in name, Team China definitely won't spare any of you. Koinamasu's face immediately turned pale. The ache in his arm also ceaselessly reminded him about the monster that was Team China's leader. A fear of death immediately assailed his heart. His pained moans began more obvious. Saraoi's complexion was also ashen, and after a long while she asked, then what about that Chu Xian from Team China? He has intelligence on par with you, right? Won't he think through it? They've lost a main combatant, and they may have casualties fighting us. He should be aware of that. After all, the final battle is coming. Adam interrupted her. It's simple. With that uncommunicative, unfeeling, unexpressive man's thinking process, he'll probably come up with a method of battle that won't produce casualties and directly erase your team. If your hearts are still fantasizing about this or hoping to come to a settlement with Team China, then first get rid of the blood in your body. Don't let that Yamato people blood of the Japanese flow through you. That way, Team China may let you off like they do a dog. Shut up. Mayatakariki stood up coldly. He unsheathed his katana and pointed at the communication device. He slowly said, you can kill us, entrap us, or anything else, but don't humiliate our spirit. Perhaps you foreigners will find it strange, and think there's something mentally ill with us, but we carry the Yamato spirit in our hearts. Even in death, we won't accept humiliation. Adam's voice didn't even pause, continuing, Yamato spirit, is it? Coincidentally, your bitter enemies also have some Chinese spirit in their hearts. How do you feel? Will they let you off? Mayatakariki shut his eyes, taking a deep breath. Adam, I can't hand over Team East Sea's future to you. If Team East Sea survives this, I hope we can cooperate with you in the Angel Alliance. It'll be a true cooperation, one where we're not used like weapons by you. So saying, the katana abruptly fell, cleaving the communication device in two. The majority of Team East C remained silent, with only the muscular Baldy and a few others being startled. Koinamasu wailed, "Mayatakariki. Are you mad? How will we predict Team China's situation if you destroy Adam's communication device? Are you trying to get us all killed? Perhaps we will die." Mayatakariki turned to speak to everyone. "Everyone. My decision has been made. Well, make peace if Team China wants peace. Well, fight if they want to fight. We won't beg like dogs even if we die. That's my sole request too. Otherwise, I'll help you all in Kaisaku after you all seppuku. I definitely won't abandon everyone even in death. Let us fight together to the death." At the same time, in the world Adam was in, he was currently smiling gently at the device before him, issuing crackling sounds. Only after a long while did he press a switch on the device to stop the sound. "Adam, has Xian seen through you making moves behind the scenes?" Song Tian was sitting beside Adam. He muttered while sitting there with his eyes shut. "Not yet, no, maybe he has seen through it, or maybe not. How miraculous, what is real is fake, while what is fake is real. With just merely a team member being captured, all my plans have been rendered ineffectual. Now, I don't even know what he's thinking, and I'm at least not clear about whether he knows about my existence." Adam smiled bitterly. "Why?" Song Tian asked curiously. "Because Team East C captured someone who should not have been captured based on what we know of Zhao Yinkong's strength. There are too many intentional details about her capture, but it's because of this that I don't know what Xian is thinking. Does he know I exist? When did he find out? When Team East C began that open and above-board plot? Or when Team East C sneak attacked? Or, does he just not know, and is merely laying down this scheme before us like he does usually?" Song Tian opened his eyes. He looked at Adam, then forget it. Team China is Team China after all. Well, do our best in the final battle. You've already tried your best and have even stirred up their racial sentiments. I'm familiar with these Japanese. Their warped militaristic mindset will definitely make them fight to the bitter end. I keep feeling like there's a seemingly important detail I missed out." Adam couldn't stop smiling bitterly. He looked at the sky, saying to Song Tian after a long while, "You Chinese have the saying, right? If I was born, why did the heavens give birth to another greater genius?" Since Team East C had launched the sneak attack and contacted Team Celestial, half an hour had passed. Everyone was depressed, not knowing when Team China would attack. Or perhaps, they were waiting for them to arrive exhausted at the Diao Islands. Simply put, Team East C could no longer think, having lost Adam's wit. Perhaps we were wrong on the deck. Mayatakariki and Saraoi were walking slowly, one in front of the other. The atmosphere in the room was so oppressive that the two had agreed to go out and stretch their legs a while. Then, well, follow the strategy Adam established for us. Saraoi looked tenderly Mayatakariki, muttering as she lowered her head. "Not that, but our attitude towards those yellow monkeys, no, those Chinese." Saraoi immediately went silent. She normally didn't say much regarding this topic, as she knew of Mayatakariki's background. His grandfather was a brigadier general ranked officer in the Japanese army in the World War II era, and his father was a mainstay of the Black Dragon Society. In the circumstances where his family were all right-wing, he had been inculcated with the narrow-minded values of the Japanese far-right since birth. In comparison, Saraoi's father had been a member of the Japanese Communist Party. Although the party had gradually declined, her family had indeed been Japanese friends close to China. They had also helped in China's 3 North Shelter Forest program in China's northwest, and her family had sent people to help. So, she had spent half her youth in China, and her horizons were broadened by her experiences there. She knew the world wasn't as the Japanese right-wing declared, and that China wasn't the China that the right-wing was hostile towards. It was a mighty country. But what could she alone do? The Japanese right-wing ran amok, wantonly revising textbooks and refusing to admit the World War II war crimes. Due to Japan's stubbornness in this area, and the right-wing's long-time antagonism towards China's actions, China only disliked Japan all the more. This feud thus became more and more real. Even her companions in this team were all trapped in this thinking. She knew that Mayatakariki and his father's generation were different. He was a man with a kind heart. The reason he entered God's realm was due to his frustration over not being able to save his companion during a car accident. But even if it was him, a kind-hearted person, he would refer to the Chinese as yellow monkeys normally and show various kinds of disdain after receiving the toxicity of the Japanese right-wing and militaristic thinking. Perhaps, us Japanese really are as some American authors say. Well, grovel and beg the strong, but be rude and brazen to the weak. For example, the much stronger than us Team China. Saraoi looked with complex emotions at Mayatakariki, listening carefully to every word of his. This world doesn't have inferior races, only inferior people. All races will have gems of greatness within, but also despicable people, traitors, repulsive people, cowards, and so on. It's not as father and grandfather said, where the Chinese has long since lost their souls, and you can only refer to them as yellow monkeys since the Song period. Adam was right. We have our Yamato spirit, and they have their Chinese heart. There's nothing superior or inferior. Mayatakariki focused his gaze far off. He muttered, ever since we heard about the 3 strongest teams in our first team battle, Devil, Celestial, and China, as well as much about the strongest Zhengzha, his clone, and regarding their comrades I couldn't believe they were base people. Every powerhouse deserves respect. Only with sufficient courage, spirit, intent, and ambition could one become a powerhouse. Perhaps we were wrong. The Chinese are still the Chinese who created a glorious history, except they're like Napoleon said, sleeping, for when she wakes, she will shake the world. This is the bad habit of us Japanese people, right? What bad habit? Mayatakariki asked curiously. Oppressing the weak and venerating the strong. Mayatakariki went silent, and recited these 7 words. His gaze was indescribably complex, and after a long while, he sighed, perhaps it is a bad habit. But, to be able to fight to the death with a powerhouse, it's sufficient for such a sword's radiance even if it withers away in an instant like the cherry blossoms. If we survive and return to the real world, I will surely go to the memorial hall of the victims in Nanjing massacre by Japanese invaders and kneel for forgiveness. That is, if we survive. If we do die I hope you can bring me with you. Holding Mayatakarik's waist, the two stood there quietly, experiencing what could perhaps be the final bit of warmth. Not good. Saraoi suddenly shouted. She ran to the conference room, her face red. She looked to have been angered into confusion. Mayatakariki froze, then immediately recovered and angrily followed after. In the conference room, Koinomitsu was pouncing on Yinkong's body, his eyes red. He was hurling abuse, using his remaining arm to tear at her upper bodice clothes. The two just happened to enter as he tore off her upper outer garments and her chest wrap. Those indescribably marvelous breasts thus stood firm before all present. What are you doing? Before Saraoi could say anything, Mayatakariki had already shouted and landed a foot on Koinomitsu's back, sending this man who was taller than him flying several meters away. He crashed into the hard wooden table with crash, breaking it into splinters. Are you crazy? If you want to play with a woman, go back to God's dimension and make one yourself. Don't embarrass us Yamato people here. She's a captive, not a prostitute for you to play with. Mayatakariki roared. Koinomitsu used a single hand to wipe away the fresh blood on his forehead. He hideously smiled as he stood up, shouting at the same time, it should be you who's crazy. You actually decided on your own to reject Adam's help. Do you think you're better than Team Celestial's strategist? You're just forcing us on the road to ruin. I don't want to die with you, and especially die in humiliation under the hands of those yellow monkeys, no, yellow pigs. Shut it. Respect towards your enemy is respecting yourself. Please call them Chinese. Mayatakariki shouted, making the stance of being about to rush at Koinomitsu. Koinomitsu seemed willing to risk everything, retreating as he shouted, you've forgotten the glory of the Yamato people. Where's your warrior spirit? You're actually calling those pigs Chinese. Have you forgotten how your father's generation fought in Manchuria? You actually have sympathy for an inferior race? Mayatakariki roared as he unsheathed his katana, scolding at the same time, you're really crazy. What is in that head of yours? Will you take pride in attacking someone who can't resist? Correct. There's no need for any compassion towards these inferior races. The reply came. Then who will you be compassionate towards? Members of Team Celestial? Mayatakarik's katana slashed towards Koinomitsu's head, stopping there, only coldly asking. It's naturally different when it comes to Team Celestial. Koinomitsu hadn't thought that Mayatakariki really wanted to cut him, and cold sweat immediately started flowing on his body, and there is a trace of carefulness in his words. Mayatakariki was so angry upon hearing that he couldn't say a word. The hand carrying the katana couldn't stop trembling, leaving a bloody mark on Koinomitsu's head. The people around them hurriedly counseled them, working together to break the two apart. Several even muttered, since we're enemies with Team China already, give her to him. Why are we talking about compassion when it comes to those yellow monkeys? You all are crazy. What are you all thinking? He was even more enraged and confused now, but upon closer inspection, he realized everyone was looking at him with incomprehension and slight traces of disdain, as if he was the one talking crazy. Is it really our bad habit, to oppress the weak and venerate the strong? How shameless and despicable. Is this the warrior spirit and Yamato spirit I believed in? Mayatakariki abruptly felt like his belief and world was collapsing. Only when a small hand held his tightly did he recover. Saraoi was standing close behind him, this is the true Yamato people. Because of that brainwashing and the right wing running amok, a large majority more or less have this kind of inclination. We are just the extreme minority amongst our people, and so is Koinomitsu. However, the majority of those in between are slowly leaning towards the right. Is that so? Mayatakarik's heart was becoming more and more dismal. Those before him were his companions before, and yet they looked so ugly and unbearable right now. But, before he could say anything, a shrill warning sound sounded from outside the conference room, the entire fleet sounding off an alarm for an enemy raid. Team China cometh. Are you sure Yinkong didn't hold back? Zheng stared into the distance at the ship's prow, murmuring at the same time towards those behind him. Yes. She didn't hold back. To be accurate, she coincidentally met someone who grasped her weak point. It's likely to have mental disorder when two personalities coexist in the same body. The mental instability is innately decided, and normal people with split personalities will usually have slight mental illnesses. The opponent attacked this weakness of hers. Xian replied certainly. Then what about the final battle? If someone used this weakness of hers then, wouldn't she be? No, it shouldn't matter. By then, Her main and secondary personality should already. What exactly should already happen, Xian didn't say. However, Zheng and the rest were already mentally prepared, so it was enough to just say that. No one knew what would happen in the final battle. Perhaps China would win by a landslide. However, the largest probability would be Team Devil maintaining their position at the apex. Of course, the small possibility that Team Celestial would take home the final victory existed as well. Anything was possible. Although the final battle was a conflict of man's might, the will of heaven would also influence the conclusion. Yingkong was temporarily safe. Through the metal piece stuck below the watch, everyone could monitor each and every action of Team East C. Of course, it was short range, but it was sufficient to ensure her safety. Overall, Team East C was indeed deterred by Team China's strength. They didn't dare touch a hair of Yingkong so far at least. They should be communicating with Team Celestial through a device. However, God's realm doesn't have such an exchange or even manufacturing process. I am absolutely sure of this. There's an 80% probability they obtain the black skin or white skins, or even the yellow race's inheritance. This was Xian's verdict after surveilling Team East C, but this verdict roused the doubts of Zheng and the rest. Wasn't the yellow race's inheritance obtained by us? What else could there be? To be accurate, we did indeed obtain the yellow race cultivator organization's inheritance. However, the yellow race saint organization's inheritance is still unfound just as before. In fact, the other two races' inheritances can be divided as well into the cultivator and saint portions. In other words, there are 6 major inheritances to be found in God's realm. Team Celestial should have obtained one, only that we don't know whether they obtained a bit or the full portion. Xian said seriously. Alright, there's no point thinking so much now. How to scheme for the final battle is you and Hunglu's responsibility. How to battle, how to protect our comrades. I've always had faith in your intelligence. It's the same for the final battle. My life, as well as that of everyone else, lies in you and Hunglu's hands. Now, we should focus on the coming battle. After Yingkong was captured, and sufficient information on Team Celestial had been gathered, Team China's destroyer turned around to welcome the United States 7th Fleet. After perfectly confusing Atom, Team China could finally go all out in their fight. They could seek redress for Team East C's sneak attack, and also. Wangxia, do you hate the Japanese? Xian suddenly directed a question at Wangxia, who had been constantly silent at the side. Wangxia froze, and finally grit his teeth and spat out after a long time, I hate them. Why so? Xian nodded, recording something on a journal. History, as well as now. Wangxia didn't hesitate. He said these words with a heavy tone, then walked out through the hatch door alone. No one knew where he was going. Xiao Honglu, do you hate the Japanese? Cheng Xiao, do you hate the Japanese? Zhang Heng, do you hate the Japanese? Imhotep, do you hate the Japanese? Japanese. Who are those? Zheng, do you hate the Japanese? Xian, have you gone retarded? You're asking everyone this strange question. If you have some conspiracy, just spit it out. Don't keep it inside, then suddenly come out and scheme us. Not really anything. Just some research on human nature. Zheng, want me to do some psychological counseling for you? Let's talk about human nature. Xian maintained his ever-indifferent expression, neither getting angry nor defending himself. He only continuously scribbled in his journal while talking to Zheng. Psychological counseling? Your psychological counseling? Forget it. Forget it, I don't want to become a mental patient. Just say it directly, what do you want? Zheng said. Just researching human nature, as well as the possibility of Team East C Psyche Force user cooperating with us. Xian replied. Zheng went silent. After entering the consciousness world, he naturally understood the uncomparable peril within. Although it wouldn't be too dangerous within for a Psyche Force user entering, the peril didn't exist merely for outsiders. It also existed for the owner of the consciousness world. If the Psyche Force user possessed nefarious intent, the sleeping Team China members were dead for sure. Are you saying Team East C Psyche Force user won't help us? He felt like he had said something stupid as soon as the words left his mouth. The two sides were enemies after all, and a deeper reason were in Xian's words. Do you hate the Japanese? Hatred went two ways. Did the Japanese hate them? Yes, feuds work this way. You hate me, I hate you. The actions caused by the hatred makes the hatred snowball, and the previous history remains. If we don't face it, letting go of that hatred isn't easy. Do you have any way? Zheng sighed as he asked. Xian said indifferently, if we threaten their lives, we should be able to make their Psyche Force user yield. But if we want a sincere cooperation, benefits are needed. Reversing the mindsets of two races isn't something a few people can do. Even I don't have a way to change the human heart within a short period of time, so benefits are needed as enticement. Benefits. Points are benefits. Rank rewards are benefits. Even life, status, or the Psyche Force user's precious companions are all benefits. Everything that happens under the sky are incited by benefits after all. Zheng nodded, and thought for a long while before responding, well, cross that bridge when we get to it. However, that man who wanted to humiliate Yingkong must die. Whatever. You are the leader. Xian lowered his head to look at his journal again. It was as if the coming battle was unrelated to him. Yes, I am the leader. So, let all me bear all these burdens, like killing, Zheng thought inwardly. Sir, we're 30 nautical miles away from the fleet. A voice interrupted Zheng's train of thoughts, when several officers ran over on the deck. Understood. All of you go and hide in the ship's hold. The coming battle will be fierce. If you're not careful, you'll be dragged in. It's just this one battle. You'll be safe after. When the time comes, happily enjoy the glory and riches you exchanged for with your lives. Zheng turned and gave a light smile, saying to these officers. The officers quieted down, then gave Zheng a salute before proceeding to the hold together. Apart from a few Navy soldiers steering the destroyer, the rest were all hiding out in the hold. Then Team East Sea, are you ready? Our Team China's surprise attack begins now. On the other side, Team East Sea heard the fleet's warning alarms. All the members were startled. They no longer cared about the matter of the captive's treatment, and all of them looked involuntarily at Mayatakariki. He was the team's strongest, as well as their team leader and pillar. Mayatakariki exhaled deeply, before saying seriously, there's something wrong with how you think. I will change you if we return alive to God's dimension. Those who don't want to change had better die in this world, or I'll have you all die through seppuku. Think through it yourselves. Finished speaking, Mayatakariki unsheathed the katana on his waist. He said to Saraui, scan the positions of the destroyer, the fleet, and all members of the team. Saraui was hurriedly rearranging Yinkong's clothes. The clothes and chest wrap had been completely ripped apart, and she only helplessly take off her own outer clothing and bundle Yinkong up within. She then activated her psyche force and scanned the surroundings. Within around 10 seconds, the flash from an explosion appeared in the distance. The violent explosion caused the seawater to rise over 100 meters into the sky. Along with this explosion, a similarly violent explosion occurred. This explosion, however, occurred on the surface of the sea, causing a giant semicircle to appear on the sea surface, which too rose, several tens of meters into the sky. A submarine was just destroyed. She didn't even need say it. Everyone saw the scene clearly within the scan. A bomb constructed from some unknown material with destructive power on par with a miniature nuclear bomb had blown apart a submarine in the midst of preparing an attack. No, perhaps it really was a miniature nuclear bomb. As the words fell, another submarine split into two. It was continuously destroyed from the cracked edges. Without an explosion, it completely disappeared. This situation was countless times more strange and terrifying than the explosion before. Team China, are you intimidating us? That's correct. It's intimidation. Zheng stood on the prow, shouting to the rest of the team. It's not just to intimidate Team East Sea, but so as the armies of the other countries in this world, as well as the Angel Alliance. We shall completely and utterly annihilate the United States 7th Fleet, as well as a majority of Team East Sea. Well, tell them not to casually agitate us. In the final battle, us Team China are worthy of the reputation of being amongst the three strongest in the realm. Then, let the battle begin. Zero and Wangxia, you two will be responsible for eliminating any submarines that get near us. Xianzai can temporarily be utilized as a psyche force scan. The three of you will stay behind, to protect the rookies at the same time. Cheng Xiao shall stay back as well. Use your close combat to protect Zero and the rest. You can't fly after all, so it's not suitable for you after you go over. Hung will be in charge of all missiles sent over to attack this ship. Your job is the most important. You have to protect everyone well. Zheng considered briefly, then continued, Honglu and Imhotep, you two will follow me to attack. Honglu, summon the little dog. It's been sleeping so long, and should get some exercise. Just don't fly too high. The lighting in the skies should be what's restricting the flight of flying life forms. I'm afraid it won't be able to endure it. Honglu nodded, as Zheng asked Imhotep, then, will your sand ability be impeded greatly in the rain and sea? Imhotep immediately nodded. It will indeed be restricted, but it wouldn't matter on a ship. It's not ordinary sand after all, but something produced through my personal magic abilities. ITLL use more magical energies here, but ITLL be sufficient against ordinary people. Is that so? Good, then well, move out. Suddenly, Lu Yu, who had always been quietly at the side, suddenly opened his mouth. Wait a bit. Can I join? Everyone around were astonished in response, and the boy's face reddened. He said in a soft voice, I can stay with Honglu under the protection of the giant dragon, so I shouldn't have any danger. The important thing, I haven't actually had practical experience for my summon cards. If I use it here, he'll have personal experience for the final battle. Is that alright? Okay. Zheng exhaled, and patted the boy's hair. He said to the rest, then, the arrangements for the battle will be so. Let's teach Team East Sea a lesson about what a God's Realm team truly is and what kind of team our Team China is. Finished speaking, Zheng rose into the sky first, flapping his wings as he flew into the distance. It had to be admitted that the United States 7th Fleet was indeed a powerful fleet with few peers in the world. It not only had a wide assortment of ships, but its personnel were also well trained. When they saw Team China attacking and the warning alarms blaring, they urgently mobilized. The entire fleet had already made their preparations to intercept the attacking enemies. It was only a pity that they weren't facing a conventional combat power of this world, but that of the all-surpassing God's Realm power, which vastly eclipsed the strength they imagined. Zheng flapped his wings as he flew over, a brilliance flashing non-stop on his body. He reached an incredible flight speed by relying on the power produced through the collision of refined chi and magic. However, it was because of this that he was fearlessly incandescent within this stormy world. On his way over, the warships below attacked him constantly, with the bigger ones even launching anti-air missiles, rocketing towards him as it traced his flight path. "You're seeking death." Zheng didn't avoid it, only drawing Tiger's soul and sending an ordinary slash over. He cleaved several missiles apart and with a thunderous boom, caused them to explode. With just a brief flash of light, he resisted the impact of those explosions, then speedily raced over, directly landing on a destroyer from a height of 100 meters. Instant destruction. The blood energy and chi within Zheng's body violently collided, and he had already chopped out at the destroyer's center viciously at the same moment he entered instant destruction. The destroyer was merely of an ordinary steel alloy, so how could it endure a strike from Zheng in his demi-dragon transformation? With a tearing sound, the destroyer actually began to split in two, and Zheng, who just straightforwardly decided he might as well go all out, leapt up into the air and unleashed another few saber strikes. Every strike possessed the immense force of instant destruction, and was as terrifying as if it could collapse mountains. After those strikes, the destroyer truly split into two, the two pieces sinking vertically down into the sea one after another. So powerful what horrifying might with a Psyche Force user, Team East Sea naturally saw all this. When they saw Zheng cleave apart a destroyer with a few strikes, all their faces turned pale. Even with their identities of God's Realm team members, they were still constrained by Team East Sea's weakness and had never battled with the utmost apex of God's Realm. Although they had met Team Celestial, they had only reached an agreement of alliance, and hadn't gone through any pitched and heated battle. So, Zheng could be said to be the first great powerhouse they met. He had unlocked the mid-4th stage or even higher, had conquered his heart's devil, possessed self-created abilities and was a figure of great personal power. Zheng's might had far transcended their imaginations, a figure like a demonic god. How could he be this strong? How did he train to this stage? Mayatakariki lamented despairingly. He was still a warrior, and although he hadn't stepped into Zheng's realm, he had some personal understanding towards power. He knew the exchanges from God were but the starting point. One needed training and evolution to become strong. Relying on exchanges from large quantities of points and rank rewards was but a superficial mightiness. They were actually incredibly weak inside. For example, that was how it was for the slaver teams he had heard about. Thus, all the true powerhouses within God's realm had relied on themselves to reach there. Those who relied on exchanges didn't have the qualifications to call themselves a powerhouse. If so, how did this terrifying person before them train? How many hopeless battles did he experience? "Let's fight," Mayatakariki said with a heavy tone as he shut his eyes. Are you crazy? You want to fight that monster? Is your head even more hard-headed than this destroyer?" Koinomasu at the side began to wail. His current mental state already seemed deranged, or perhaps to say he had been terrified into this state. "Correct, we have to battle," Mayatakariki resolutely said as he looked at the rest. "We're already the weaker party, but we have to maintain the last bit of courage within our hearts. If even this courage disappears, we might as well commit suicide. We won't have the qualifications to get stronger in this realm anymore, as we don't even have the courage to become strong. I don't care how much you disdain the Chinese, but it's for a fact that they're stronger. Giving your enemy respect is giving yourself respect. I won't die kneeling, and shall die standing. Of course, if Team China is willing to make peace, I won't throw away your chances of survival. Only want you feel ashamed." Mayatakariki didn't mind the rest after finishing his words. He only gave a deep look at Sarawi. The rest of Team East Sea constantly whispered amongst themselves, but their words became increasingly rude towards Mayatakariki. "What a bunch of idiots. Do you really wish to live on as dogs?" Sarawi asked disdainfully. All of their faces changed greatly, with a middle-aged man among them shouting, "Don't put it so badly. What's wrong with surviving?" The rest followed along in gradually scolding, with only Koinomasu glaring at Sarawi and Yinkong with hatred. Curiously, he didn't say a word. "Umph, how shameless. You kept feeling like you were some expert before. You kept talking about the honorable Yamato people, about yellow pigs and about the sick man of Asia. Now, you're suddenly changing your tune to making peace upon seeing how powerful the enemy are. You want to survive and don't want to infuriate the other side. Being teammates with you all is my greatest shame in this life," Sarawi said coldly. She ignored the rest and directly cut off their psyche force scanning of the sea. She carried Yinkong on the ground and walked out. "Wait, if we're fighting, count me in." The old man. "Count me in as well." After a long period of silence, a man of age 27 or 28 got up as well. He didn't speak much, but directly left. Sarawi nodded silently, and bestowed the two with the psyche force map. She then directed the rest with a cold smile, leaving the meeting room with the two. The first to leave, Mayatakariki, had already reached the deck. He looked at the constantly rising explosions in the distance, silently grasping the katana in his hand. He had never been as despairing before than as of this moment, and had never been so calm. Perhaps, these feelings he had never had before had arisen from facing powerhouses that far outclassed him. "Team China, give me a glorious death." Although Sarawi had left the meeting room, she didn't go to the deck. She carried Yinkong to the hold area. As she was a psyche force user, protecting her own safety was sufficient. There was no need to personally face Team China in battle. Psyche force users' usage lay in the grand scheme of things, and not the minute details. "Kariki-kun, when you pass on, He'll surely follow after. Sarawi said quietly in her heart. After exhaling, she pushed open the door and entered the room. She then put her full attention into manipulating the Psych Force scan, scanning all the attacking Team China members within. At this moment, Team China had already completely launched their attack. The destroyer was charging over to the fleet, and submarines below the sea blew apart one after another. There was simply no submarine with the opportunity to near the destroyer and launch an attack. After the continuous submarine explosions, the destroyer had already neared the perimeter of the fleet. The outermost warships had already completed their preparations. When Team China entered the range of fire, several anti-ship missiles were fired. There was a large impact on the range from the storm, and the two sides were practically close enough to look at each other before they fired their missiles. When the first missile flew 30 meters out, a silvery light shone on Team China's destroyer. 4 arrows flew out at the same time. The arrow behind would strike the tail of the arrow in front, causing an explosive collision. When only a single arrow remained, its momentum was akin to a lightning bolt. It pierced through the foremost missile at a speed that vastly surpassed the limits of what the human eye could follow. The missile paused momentarily in mid-air, before being penetrated by the arrow, exploding. The arrow that drilled through didn't stop, but instead struck the side of a cruiser. It pierced through the metal plates and hit the center of the ship before even a second or two had passed. The arrow's power didn't decrease in the slightest, and passed through the other side of the cruiser, finally flying off to places unknown. Hung silently measured the power of the 4-arrow explosive shot, then placed one of the 4 arrows in his hand down. He only pointed 3 arrows at the remaining missiles. If it was just to annihilate these missiles, the 3-arrow explosive shot's might was completely sufficient. This would also let him conserve his strength, so that he wouldn't be unable to deal with these missiles after being exhausted. Zero besides him ignored the missiles, only watching the sea surface with rapt attention. Wang Xia was standing behind him, several miniature nuclear bombs floating around him. The nukes were already being controlled by his bomb dominator, and could initiate an explosion attack at any moment, their power even greater than normal miniature nuclear bombs. Behind the three was Xian. He gazed silently at the sea surface, a rune appearing in his right eye. The rune was a little different from the one in Aragon. Apart from the rune, there was a black and white light faintly intersecting, forming a Taiji diagram. They were continuously coming together and coming apart, ever changing. If someone were to look closely into his eyes, they would definitely find their vision going blurry. All right. The remaining submarines are already gathering in the center of the fleet. Let's continue our attack. Xian looked at the sea surface for a while, and the rune as well as Taiji diagram within his eye vanished, except that he seemed much more haggard. Not long after Xian spoke, an enormous roar came from behind. An immense black dragon appeared there. The deck couldn't accommodate its bulk, so the black dragon had no choice but to stand, and the entire destroyer sunk down slightly. The destroyer only reverted to its original state when the dragon extended its wings and flew forward. This black dragon was indeed Team China's black dragon doggy that had evolved not long before. Zhen had given it to Honglu as a mount. It had been sleeping in the tamer medallion since then, until Honglu released it at this moment. To it, only a second had passed. The black dragon was actually quite obedient, and let Honglu's group of 3 sit on its back. With a long howl it flew up and soared towards the distant United States 7th Fleet. The soldiers of the 7th Fleet was flabbergasted. They were but ordinary people, so when had they ever seen such a terrifying organism before? That immense body as well as the very image of the giant dragons in Western fantasy, immediately aroused a disturbance among the naval soldiers as soon as it appeared. A majority of the soldiers at their stations made an uproar, and a few were even terrified that they collapsed, paralyzed on the ground. For a moment, apart from a very small minority that held fast to their posts, the counterattack of the fleet at the perimeter of the fleet stopped. The terror this black dragon brought was much greater than Team China imagined. This is good. If I knew earlier they would be this scared, I'll have called out the little doggy earlier. When Honglu saw the soldiers below running away, and a few even jumping into the sea, he immediately said laughingly. There was slightly a whining sound, as the cruiser below fired off an anti-ship missile. No one knew which daring soldier had launched it, and the black dragon happened to be flying close by above. It couldn't avoid in time, and unable to guard in time as well, the black dragon's lower abdomen was directly struck by the missile. With a violent booming, the black dragon was immediately enveloped in the explosion's blaze. The soldiers below were all shocked, and for a time everyone stopped to look silently at the sky, wanting to know whether the black dragon had been blown apart by the missile. Unexpectedly, when the blaze dissipated, the black dragon was hovering in the air, seemingly unscathed. Its figure was covered by a faintly visible layer of defensive barrier, which had blocked the explosion. Instead, it blew out true fire due to the missile. Roar! The black dragon howled at the skies, belching out a stream of flame. A white color appeared within those flames. It directly landed on the cruiser. Many Navy soldiers transformed into ash before they could let out a sound. The flames continuously began to melt downwards. As if it were chocolate, the steel alloy began to melt, and became molten liquid within a moment. The dragon's flamethrower lasted for tens of seconds, melting a giant hole in the cruiser's center of 10 meters in diameter. It was unfathomably deep, practically melting through the entire cruiser. As if it had vented enough, it snorted out black smoke from its nostrils, flying to another warship with He-3 in tow. Mayatakariki, who was standing on the distant flagship's deck, saw all this. The Psyche Force scan imprinted it vividly within his mind. He saw even how that missile was blocked with that visible defensive barrier and that horrifying blazing white flamethrower of that black dragon, as well as the nearing Zhenzhou. It was meaningless to talk any more about living on. They had wrongly gauged the gap between the two sides, and the painful consequences were about to come. No, it wasn't just the painful consequences of that, but the painful consequences of always using the words yellow monkeys. It really isn't an unjust death. Mayatakariki muttered to himself. Besides him, the two men, one young and one old, stood there resolutely. The young man patted his shoulder lightly, not saying anything. However, this was enough. Mayatakariki slowly raised his head, black runes appearing faintly on his skin. When he completely raised his head, they completely appeared. Kamamiya Tonomoto and Mitarashi, do you think the Chinese still deserve to be called yellow monkeys? Mayatakariki asked mutteringly. The old man, Kamamiya, laughed hoarsely. I've never thought the words yellow monkey should exist. They self-righteously called out these words as their minds, eyes, ears, and souls have been deceived by the right. Those familiar with history and the world won't say this. It's just that us few have no power to change anything. That's why even more we need to live on, so we can return to the real world and change our race's bad habits. We need to let them understand that the weak aren't to be bullied, and the strong aren't to be worshipped. We should actually learn from that indomitable spirit of the Chinese. It's those who improve themselves who are truly strong, and not those who are already strong that are actually strong. The man called Mitarashi nodded lightly. Mayatakariki sighed, Tonomoto hasn't said those words to me before. I'll keep these words in my heart. Now that I think about it, our Yamato people's warrior spirit was long since, as you said, Tonomoto, where the weak aren't to be bullied, and the strong aren't to be worshipped. It's only that those in power distorted it, so as to fit in with their militaristic thinking as well as their filthy right-wing thinking. Now, the warrior spirit we Yamato people speak of has long since changed for the worse, which is why we look down on our past teachers and benefactors. We even committed unforgivable crimes against them. Even now those in power don't want to admit, which is why we only think the strong are to be respected. That's why there's this bad habit of ours that American writers speak of. If we don't die, I will definitely change all this. These are my final words. Gentlemen, it's my greatest honor fighting to the death with you two. Kamimiya Tonomoto and Mitarashi-kun, don't lower your honorable warrior heads. The weak aren't to be bullied and the strong aren't to be worshipped. Let's go and find that true warrior spirit again. As the words fell, a heavy boom resounded before them. A person had crashed down in front of them, creating a half-meter deep hole in the deck before them. A shrill alarm permeated the entire flagship. The surrounding soldiers all directed their weapons in that direction. Zhenzhou stood within that depression. This should be our first meeting, leader of Team China, Zhenzhou. It's nice to meet you. Mayatakariki said to Zheng, his tone neither overbearing nor humble. Zheng took a look at Mayatakariki, that youth gripping a katana. Although he was an enemy, his performance while under their surveillance left Zheng with no ill intent towards the man. He was after all someone who could treat captives kindly, and was an honorable warrior. He couldn't be too bad, even if he was Japanese. In any case, they wanted Team East's Psyche Force user to help, so he nodded coolly. Yes, I am Team China's leader Zhenzhou. Are only you three here to welcome me? If it were others saying this, perhaps Mayatakariki would have felt some sense of humiliation or arrogance. However, only those who knew of Zheng's strength would understand that it was completely fair of him to say this. Zheng was too strong. This mightiness had reached to the point where it was like the difference in strength between a lower-tier life form and a high-tier life form. Looking from afar before had already given the sense of being unrivaled, but now that the three were right before him, the pressure was incredibly obvious. There was even the feeling that there was a giant and towering mountain before them. Zheng's question to them had some doubt in them. It wasn't sarcasm, but the truth. Don't even mention just 3 people, dealing with him would require an army. Apologies. Those that are worthy of fighting by my side only number 2. The rest don't qualify as my companions, so you'll have to show your honorable personage some disrespect by facing your might with us 3. Zheng's mind moved, and he thought about what they had observed. This Mayatakariki, as well as that girl Saraoi, were obviously different from those who kept using the words yellow monkey. Although he didn't know what their innermost thoughts were, they couldn't be bad to an extreme level. Mayatakariki gave a serious look at Zheng. Can we not make peace? Although we're enemies, we don't have too much of a conflict in our plot missions. In fact, it's non-existent. Also, considering your Team China's strength, getting a large increase in your points and rank rewards shouldn't be doable within a short period of time, right? Can we make peace? Zheng frowned slightly. At first, he nodded, but then it changed to a shake of his head. We can make peace. But not now. Team East C has some who must die. Is that so? Mayatakarik's expression immediately became much more gloomy. He had misinterpreted Zheng's words, and thought that Zheng meant that Team China happened to lack some points and rank rewards, and needed to kill a few. Then, my final question. Zheng-kun, as a Chinese, do you hate us Japanese? I hate. But I don't hate you all the same time. Zheng said bluntly, I hate your government, as well as your right wing. Also, the many things you've done, such as revising textbooks, forcibly occupying our islands and not respecting history by distorting and modifying it. But I don't hate some of you. Those of you who came to my country to help with the large-scale tree planting in the northwest, those who went to the memorial hall of the victims in Nanjing massacre to kneel, and those who had spent a whole 30 years helping my country's agriculture education. I'm clear on my gratitude and grudges, and who to hate and who not to. I'll pay back my debts and take my revenge when it's needed. Relax. Even if my Team China wins the final battle and returns to the real world, we won't commit the atrocities you're imagining. I have my pride. My gratitude, Zheng Kun. You too have your warrior spirit. To battle with you is my honor. Mayatakariki laughed heartily. He gripped his katana and took a step forth. The enhancement I pursued is called the Ghost Knight. The subclass I use is the Crying Ghost, which is primarily using the heart to rend to soul. Let us battle, powerhouse of Team China. Let me see exactly how strong this apex of God's realm is. He made a horizontal sweep as he finished his words. However, the katana brushed against his own neck, before he used a hand to wipe the blood on his body. As Mayatakariki wiped the fresh blood, the black runes on his body became more obvious, and it looked as if there were a layer of black mist on his body. He laughed, and held his katana aloft, chopping down. Ghost slash. Zheng didn't attack first, just silently looking at Mayatakariki apply fresh blood on his body. He then saw a black glow appear on Mayatakariki's body, before he chopped down. This slash brought a black and misty light blade with it, and Zheng was immediately shocked. He stepped down and retreated. Unexpectedly, the black light blade had instantaneously reached. Behind the black light blade, a several meters large ferocious ghost abruptly charged out, and sent a claw striking towards Zheng. Unable to guard in time, Zheng could only block with a single hand. However, it directly passed through the ferocious ghost's claw. The arm that entered the ghost's body abruptly vanished, and a grotesque hole was torn open by the ghost's claw in the middle of his chest. Zheng was inwardly shocked at this terrifying power. However, he suddenly realized no brilliance had flashed on his body. In other words, his defensive systems hadn't been activated, and he immediately shouted, "Wrong! Illusions!" As expected, as he continuously unlocked the genetic constraint, the ferocious ghost and wounds disappeared by the time he unlocked the third stage. Only Mayatakariki slashing down was left before him. He stepped down and retreated again. The slash landed on the deck, and carried a corrosive effect, causing the deck to begin to melt. The light blade completely vanished only when 2 meters of depth had been dissolved. The katana rends the fleshy body, while the heart rends the soul. My katana is still burdened with hesitation, and my heart still cannot rend the soul. Zheng Kun, don't show mercy. Show me respect. Mayatakariki gave a deep exhalation, laughing. Zheng exhaled as well, before laughing. Honestly, this move is indeed greatly advantageous against those below the third stage, or those with flaws in their hearts. A pity though. This move should have a higher realm. The so-called heart rends the soul should be giving you a clear path forward. Then I shall begin to battle, leader of Team East C, as well as the other two. No need to be polite. Come at me with your maximum power, because a battle that far surpasses you in level awaits. I shall continuously raise my strength. Well, start with explosion. At the same time as Zheng reached the flagship, Saraoi was praying non-stop in her room. Her heart was truly filled with love towards Mayatakariki, and she hoped that he would be able to survive no matter what. Alas, she no longer knew how to help him live on as of now. Suddenly, a violent sound traveled over from the door, as if someone was using strength to knock on the door. Saraoi's mind flashed in understanding. A sweep of psyche force let her know that it was Koinamasu and the rest of Team East C. They all had ferocious expressions as they stood at the door. Koinamasu, especially, was repeating, beating the door with his muscles swelled up. Saraoi, hand that Team China member over to us. We want to hand her over to Team China's leader. That way we can survive. A middle-aged muscular man shouted. Koinamasu made noise even more madly. What handing over? We're using her as a hostage. As soon as we had her, Team China rushed over to save her. She must be important. I'm guessing she's that monster's lover. It's definitely so, there's no better choice than using her as a hostage. We will surely survive. Saraoi said coldly, the lot of you should scram. You are no longer my Orkuriki's companions. We don't have companions like you all. It's best for you all to stay a bit further from me. I don't want to see human waste like you all. Those outside stopped dead, before becoming even more enraged. The muscles on Koinamasu's body transformed continuously, until he became a mini-giant. He viciously punched the giant door, shouting at the same time, screw your leader. I'm not doing this anymore, I just want to survive. You're falling out just over a yellow pig. I also don't have a companion like you. Hand her over, or I'll kill you along with her. Saraoi's heart grew colder. She didn't say anything, only smiling coldly as she rose to her feet. Her eyes began to change in color, and the space around her body began to distort. Looking at her, it seemed she had some other power other than being a psyche force user. With a boom, the giant door was finally ruined by Koinamasu. He sent the ruined door flying at Saraoi with a kick, but it came to a halt a meter away from her. Koinamasu also knew that he couldn't let Saraoi unleash all her power. He rushed to before the ruined door, ignoring everything else as he unleashed punch after punch over. At the same time, he shouted, everyone kill this traitor to her country. We can only survive if we do so. Those outside were both dumbfounded and motionless. However, when they saw Zhao Yingkong, who was lying on the bed, their expressions turned hideous once again. They all charged in as a group. Apart from two who went to capture Ying Kong, the rest used various methods to launch attacks on Sarawi. Sarawi could only defend herself, and the distorted space began to decrease in size. Need my help? Those participating in the battle looked over in shock. The originally unconscious Zhao Yingkong was standing there giggling. The two who had ran over to capture her were both twisted in an extremely strange manner, and were continuously wailing in pain. The girl only had a beautiful smile and was acting in an innocent manner, as if the two's injuries were unrelated to her. Need my help in killing this trash? As a God's Realm team member, your strength is admittedly enough. But at the same time, the gap between the powerhouses of the realm and you remains huge. The most important reasons are, how do you plan to become strong? What is it you chase after? Zheng silently stood at his original position. The three from Team East Sea were half kneeling before him. Within a short minute, the three had already been completely knocked to the ground by him. They were unable to keep up with him just using the power and speed of explosion. In truth, the current explosion far exceeded that from when it had just been created. It near rivaled destruction at its time of creation, an indication of his body being much stronger than before. What I chase after the warrior spirit? No honor? No, what I chase after should be survival, to live on together with those important to me. Miyatakariki half knelt on the ground, allowing the rain to wash over his body. This short minute had allowed him to finally experience what was called a power that surpassed his level. His two comrades and him didn't even have the qualifications to counterattack. No, it wasn't about the so-called qualifications, but an utter lack of opportunity to do so. Within a few exchanges, they had been knocked down to the ground by attacks they couldn't even see. That reason isn't half bad. As you saw, I'm a person without any special abilities, aside from speed and strength. Apart from the level of genetic constraint to direct the speed and strength, I don't possess psyche force attacks, special techniques, or special enhancements. I only have the battle style I ceaselessly polished and refined, a power I obtained in the midst of life and death. Zheng muttered, this is my personal experience, and it's my compensation for this operation. We're not a charity organization, so we won't let off those who need be killed. If you wish to survive, become stronger, until you can protect your belief and convictions. As he finished his speech, Zheng looked behind him. Ying Kong was currently at the entrance to the ship's hold, giggling as she held an unconscious girl. You came so late. Even my clothes have been torn and my chest was seen by others. You're really not doing your job as a leader. Ying Kong slowly made her way over. She giggled as she spoke, but her eyes were utterly cold. What of the rest of Team East Sea? Zheng rubbed his head. He roughly knew what had happened to Ying Kong through the surveillance, so it wasn't good to probe deeper. Thus, he could only ask about the rest of Team East Sea. They're all inside practicing yoga. Ying Kong giggled in reply. All right, even if you've twisted them into a human pretzel, there's no need to be so happy. Ying Kong, you've worked hard. I'll get the others to move them over to Team China. You can rest. Zheng breathed out. One of his hands pulled Ying Kong's head over, and as his words finished, Ying Kong smiled and shut her eyes as her main personality sunk back into sleep. It was very safe besides Zheng, so Ying Kong naturally didn't require her main personality to appear. This would exhaust her mental energy, and Team East Sea at this moment could no longer fight. Team China's surprise attack had been pulled off flawlessly. Correct, I finally understand how Team Devil could do so leisurely when they faced us that time. When an immense disparity exists, and schemes aren't able to bridge the gap, it's easy to determine the victor when the two sides have no choice but to battle. Zheng was standing on the deck silent. However, in truth he was discussing with Xian through the metal piece. This battle with Team East Sea made him recall the battle with Team Devil in Resident Evil Apocalypse. A strange feeling existed in his heart when recalling that time. Team China had easily fallen before Team Devil just as Team East Sea, yes, it had been so effortless. Team China's wit and might had been much too lacking as compared to Team Devil at that time. They didn't chat long. The Black Dragon ferried Hunglu's group of 3 over to the flagship. It was fortunate that it was the flagship, as there wasn't any problems with the giant dragon landing. The most important thing was, those soldiers who didn't dare attack before were more so now. They fled away to the fringes of the deck, or hid away in some cabins. Imhotep, I'll have to trouble you. There are many people in the hold who can't move, so wrap them up in a sandstorm. Bring them together to our destroyer. Hunglu, help the other 2 up to the Black Dragon. Careful not to let them be hit by stray bullets. I still have some matters, so you all return first. They busied themselves upon hearing the commands, and Zheng contemplated for a while before going to the 3 Team East Sea members. I'll be borrowing your Psyche Force user. Those who need killing I'll naturally execute, while I definitely won't kill those who don't need to be. Well, be waiting for you outside the Diao Islands. If there's anything you're not satisfied with, look for me there. When he finished speaking, Zheng didn't say anything else. He flew away together with Imhotep, who had already turned into a sandstorm, leaving the 3 there half kneeling and immobile. Release her. If you want to kill, kill. Why do you need to take her captive? Release her. Mayatakariki tried his best to rise to his feet, but Zheng had been extremely skillful before. Although he hadn't actually hurt them, he had exhausted them, and they could no longer get up. Mayatakariki was trying his best to stand up right now, but he could only raise half his body. There was the sound of his wrist dislocating, and he crashed back to the ground, his head beginning to bleed. Release her. Release her. That howl traveled far, and still continued to linger by the ears when Zheng and the rest reached their destroyer. The Japanese also have good people among them. Zheng was in the meeting room's hall, muttering to the rest. There are no horrible races, only horrible individuals. Those words are correct. Team East C's leader isn't bad. He has the spirit of never accepting humiliation even in death, something China has extolled since time immemorial. Whatever the case, this team battle is our victory. Some don't need to be killed, but we can't let go of too much points and ranked rewards. Xian, allocate who should kill some Team East C members. Make sure everyone can get their individual advanced enhancements, so that Team China can go all out in the final battle. They had captured 10 Team East C members. Apart from the Psyche Force user who couldn't be killed, the rest were free game. Based on their surveillance, these 9 had already split off from Team East C, and were the most insane kind of scoundrels. There was absolutely no problem killing them. In other words, not discussing the ranked rewards for now, just the points earned would be over 10,000. This terrifying amount of team points was Team China's first time. Now, they finally understood why some teams could enhance such high tiers of enhancements and abilities, of even rank A and rank S. A single team battle was a huge harvest for them. Zheng didn't care about how the 9 were distributed, and only asked Xian, "We've captured the Psyche Force user. Can we wake them up now?" "Yes. There's been a large increase in the chances of the Psyche Force user being able to save them, as you had already raised their consciousness to the middle layer of the consciousness. But there's still a problem. When the Psyche Force user enters their consciousness, there definitely can't be even the slightest bit of disturbance. They haven't overcome the Heart's Devil like you and unlocked the 4th stage. Their consciousness body is very fragile, especially when in the middle layer where the slightest external disruption will be fatal. So, we can't let them be disturbed during their process of awakening." Xian nodded. Zheng froze. "Haven't we dealt with Team East C already? They can't attack us in any time soon, and we've crippled the United States 7th Fleet. Could it be that more enemies will appear soon?" "Yes, it'll attract more attention as we use too great a power. Those countries' fleets will target us. If even their fleet can't resist us, what do you think a country will do if they think we pose too great a threat to them and they can't oppose us?" "You mean nukes?" Zheng was immediately startled. He unlocked the 3rd stage, speaking as he thought. "This possibility isn't impossible, especially after we used power out of this world to attack the United States 7th Fleet. The situation regarding us will definitely be placed upon great attention by the various countries. Now, they don't just want our weapons. They should be able to draw the conclusion that we're heading towards Asia from our route. Do you know what'll happen if so?" Zheng nodded heavily. "They'll think we're planning to disembark and merge into the population. If in the situation where their military can't beat us and they can't fire nukes into their country's densely populated areas, their first thought will be eliminate us at sea, even if it means nukes. Is that what you mean?" "Correct. This storm may be giving us great convenience, but we may once again be thrust into danger if these countries disregard all else." "Understood. Help me contact the United States 7th Fleet Commander. I wish to discuss with him."